This experience has left me shaken, but at the same time, I feel compelled to share it with others who may have had similar experiences. I grew up in the countryside of Illinois, surrounded by forests and fields. I've always been drawn to the more natural world. Even from a young age, I had been fascinated by the creatures that inhabit these areas, especially those that are considered to be mythical or even strange. I've always been a firm believer in the existence of creatures that are beyond our understanding and that exist in the shadows of this very world. One summer evening, I was taking a casual stroll through the forest, just taking in the sights and sounds of the night around me. The air was cool. The stars were shining brightly overhead. As I walked, I suddenly heard a strange noise, like the fluttering of wings coming from the trees ahead. I cautiously approached the source of the sound. As I drew closer, I saw a figure darting in and out of the trees. At first, I assumed it was just a large bird, but as I got closer, I realized it was something far more unusual. The figure, believe it or not, was a bat humanoid of some kind, a creature that I had only read about in books and seen in illustrations. It was a creature with a human-like body and bat-like wings. It was flying through the trees, almost as if it was trying to escape from something. I stood, frozen in place, watching as the creature flew closer and closer to me. I could see the details of its face, and I was amazed by the strange, morbid beauty of its appearance. Suddenly, this thing stopped flying, turning to face me. It seemed to be sizing me up, as if it was considering whether or not to attack. I was terrified, but I could not take my eyes off this creature. Its eyes were piercing, filled with an intelligence that I could not possibly come to understand. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as this thing suddenly launched itself towards me. I thought this was the end, but then something happened. This thing suddenly dove into a nearby pond, splashing down into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. I was stunned and shocked. I couldn't believe what had just transpired, what I had just seen. I stood there for several moments, trying to make sense of what had just happened. In the days that followed, I searched for any information I could, but I couldn't find much, as you could probably imagine. I began to wonder if what I had seen was real, or just a figment of my imagination. But I know that deep down, that what I saw was real, and I will never forget such a strange and bizarre experience that I had. I hope this story finds you well. I am writing to share with you my recent encounter in the Allegheny National Forest, which has left me with an experience I can never forget. My name's John, or so you can call me. I'm an experienced hiker and camper, I guess you could say. I've been exploring various national forests for well over 10 years now, and have encountered various wildlife, but nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced on my latest trip. You see, I've always been fascinated with the idea of Bigfoot and have read countless articles and books on said topic, but I never really believed in their existence until I had my own personal encounter. I set out on my trip to the Allegheny National Forest, a place I've been to several times before, and the day was perfect, a beautiful day for a hike. I packed my gear, hit the trail, eager to immerse myself in the beauty of all that surrounded me. As I hiked, I couldn't help but feel a strange presence following me, but I brushed it off as my imagination just getting the best of me. Perhaps I was paranoid that day. However, I continued on my journey, the feeling only growing stronger. I stopped in my tracks and listened intently, but all I could hear was the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. I shrugged it off and continued on my way, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. I decided to set up my camp for the night, but could not shake the feeling that I was being followed. I tried to keep my mind occupied by reading and cooking dinner, but I couldn't help but keep glancing over my shoulder. It was then, at one point, I had heard a loud thud coming from some brush. Immediately, I grabbed my flashlight, shone it in the direction of the noise. To my shock, I saw a figure standing there. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. If I had to guess, I would say at least 7 feet tall, covered in thick, matted fur, massive build. Its eyes were piercing. I could even see the whites of its eyes shining in the darkness. Not that it was, of course, emitting light, but that's what it was like. It stood there for a few moments, looking at me, and then vanishing into the bushes behind it. I was stunned, and it took me a moment to gather my thoughts. I realized I was not safe. Immediately, I packed up my gear, hiking out in the middle of the night as quickly as I could. I never did shake the feeling that I was being followed, but I didn't dare to look back. Now, this encounter has left me with a mixture of fear and awe. I'm still trying to process what I saw and just make sense of it. I will always be a skeptic, and I still am, but there's a part of me now that's more of a believer than ever before. I think a lot of it has to do with just, I can't quite process that actually happened. Anyways, thank you for taking the time to read this. I hope this submission will help contribute to the ongoing investigation into the existence of the dark and the strange. Thank you. I've recently experienced something truly unusual and frightening on my property here in Minnesota. I'm an old rancher, and I've lived on this land for well over most of my life. I've seen a lot in my day, but what I've encountered recently is nothing I've ever seen before. I've been a pretty big skeptic when it comes to the supernatural and the paranormal, but my recent experiences have left me searching for answers. I feel as though I'm being watched. I'm desperate to find out what's going on. So, I'll start at the beginning. About a month ago, I began to feel a strange presence on the back end of my property. I've always had a good sense and discernment when things are not right, and this feeling was like nothing I've ever experienced. It was a very dark presence. I could feel it getting stronger every day. One evening, as I was checking on my cattle, I noticed something moving in the woods near the back end of my property. At first, I thought it was just an animal, but as I got closer, I realized that it was a large black figure. I was terrified. I've never been so scared in my life. This figure stood there, observing me, like it was trying to intimidate me. I've seen this same figure several times, and it always seems to be lurking right near the woodline. I've also noticed other black figures in the area. It seems they're all connected to this one presence. I'm not alone. I've tried to tell my friends and family about what I've seen, but they just think I'm imagining things. I don't know what to do. I'm feeling more and more helpless and scared as the days go on. I've always been strong and independent, but this has left me shaken. I've been losing sleep, and I could feel fear taking over my being. I'm desperate for answers. I hope that anybody with answers can help. I'm willing to share any additional information that I have and answer any questions you might have. I just want to get to the bottom of this and find some peace of mind. Me and my wife, Mabel, we live near a little lake called Silver Lake. It's just a stone's throw from our home. Silver Lake is peaceful and serene, surrounded by thick trees and the occasional oak tree. It's a place where folks go for picnics, fishing, and to enjoy the beauty of nature. Me and Mabel, we're a God-fearing couple. We've been married for 10 years now. We love each other dearly, and we love to spend some evenings out at Silver Lake, enjoying each other's company for peace and quiet on the countryside. Well, just recently, we were out at the lake, enjoying the sunset, when Mabel saw something letting out a blood-curdling scream. She was pointing at something towards the lake, her eyes widening with fear. I turned to see what had scared her, and what I saw, well, let me tell you, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever laid my eyes on. There this thing was clambering out of the lake. It was the most grotesque, reptilian, and scary thing I've ever seen. It was maybe 8 to 9 feet tall, scaly green, sharp-pointed claws. It had a long tail and was actually walking on 2 legs. I've never seen anything quite like it. She was beside herself, my wife Mabel, and I admit I was pretty scared myself. We were convinced it was a demon, sent straight from the devil himself. We were both rooted to the spot, unable to move, as this thing slowly approached, looking at us with its beady eyes. It was like time stood still as we both gazed upon this thing, and then, just as suddenly as it came out of the water, it quickly, very quickly, disappeared back underneath, leaving us both shaken and scared out of our wits. We very quickly gathered our things, ran back to the safety of our home. We called the authorities. They actually came out to investigate, but couldn't find any trace or tracks. They told us it was probably just our imagination. But my wife and I know what we experienced. It was no figment of our imagination. We both believed that what we saw was a demon sent to test our faith. And I tell you, it was a test, and we both came out stronger in our belief in the Lord. And though we're still scared to go back to Silver Lake, we know that we must face our fears, for the Lord will always protect us. I'm writing to you because I want to share our story with others, in hopes that it will help others to face their fears and have faith in God, no matter what they encounter in this world. I can remember the day when my partner and I decided to go on a hike in the Adirondacks. It was a crisp autumn day. The leaves were changing colors, making the scenery even that much more fantastic. We packed a small picnic and set off on a trail that we had never taken before. This trail had led us through a series of dense foliage and forest overrolling hills, and before we knew it, we found ourselves standing at the top of a mountain, overlooking a vast expanse of wilderness. The view was breathtaking, and with the sun setting and casting a golden glow over the landscape, we sat down on a nearby rock, taking in the beauty of our surroundings and enjoying one another's company. It was the perfect moment of peace and solitude, one that we will always cherish. Unfortunately, our moment of peace and tranquility was soon interrupted. A man came crashing through the underbrush, appearing to be on some sort of mission. He was sweating, carrying a large backpack, torn clothing, and was out of breath. He seemed just as shocked and surprised as we were to see him. He came to a stop in front of us, standing there, before asking us if he had seen it. When we had no idea what he was talking about, he began referring to a large black wolf. He claimed that it had been following him, and he was very afraid. We shook our heads and told him we had not seen or heard anything unusual. He thanked us for the help and continued on his way. We weren't exactly concerned about the man or his claims of a wolf following him. We just assumed he was homeless or mentally unstable. I remember thinking that maybe he should find a more sensible hobby than hiking through the wilderness alone. Now, it wasn't long after he left that we began to hear noises around us. Noises we could not identify and ones we did not like. It sounded like somebody following us, breaking heavy brush and branches, although we never saw anyone. We assumed it was maybe the man we had spoken to, but we had called out to him several times and there was no answer. We decided that it was probably better not to get involved, assuming it was him, and so we left. Well, here's what's weird. Later that night, both my partner and I experienced these bizarre, horrific, and lucid dreams of a large black wolf. In the morning time, it felt like I had not slept at all, and my partner agreed. Now, I'm sure there's a logical explanation to all this, but it is really strange that her and I would have these bizarre, lucid nightmares of the exact same thing. It's probably just a coincidence and nothing special at all, but sometimes these things do make me wonder. So I'm sorry if this story sucked, but hey, I thought you'd find it interesting. I live in a small town in southern New York. My house is on a hill facing west, with a nice view of the town and the rolling hills. My home is also near a trail that runs alongside the hill and connects to a park in the middle of town. Recently, I found a few podcasts I really enjoy, which I'm loving by the way, and inspired me to send this email about something weird that I recently experienced. I've lived in this house for almost an entire year now, and up until the last couple of weeks, have had zero weird experiences. My house is on a dead-end road, but I rarely hear or see any traffic, even though there's a highway not too far away. Anyway, my dog has been acting up lately. She is a lab pit mix, and I got as a puppy almost 3 years now, and is very friendly, social, especially with dogs. She will often bark at people walking or jogging by, but will stop and eventually run up to them. She is also very protective of the house, her yard, and me. Now here's the weird part. She has been growling at thin air a lot lately. I mean a lot. Like almost every other night. She calms down eventually, but not before barking and lunging at thin air for like 15 minutes straight. I have also seen something standing in my yard staring at me through my back window. This is when I'm in bed watching TV late at night. The first time it happened, I was kind of freaked out. I grabbed a baseball bat, opening up the blinds to get a better look, since it's only about 10 feet from my bed. When I looked over, all I could see, now bear with me here, was what looked like an 8-foot-tall black dog with red eyes staring back at me. We probably stared each other down for 5 minutes, until eventually it just turned around, walked off and disappeared into the dark shadows. A week later, it happened again, but this time it turns around to leave, its face coming into view. Its head is huge. It even has what appeared to be horns or antlers coming from its head, and even teeth. Oh, I forgot to mention that instead of fur, it appeared to have scales of some kind. I really have no idea what it is I'm dealing with. Any answers would be much appreciated.